Hi everyone, my name is Kathleen Drum and I am the Senior Editor at Executive Secretary magazine. I've been the editor for 4 years now, and prior to working at the magazine, I was an executive assistant working first on the London 2012 Olympic Games and then Crossrail, which is a new infrastructure project for London. So I went from working in a 100-person open plan office on the 25th floor of a tower block in Canary Wharf, central London, to working from home as part of a distributed team. So the UK team of Executive Secretary magazine, which is myself, Matt, Christian and Jenny, all work from our respective homes. We don't have a central office location. Prior to the pandemic, obviously we could work in co-working spaces or coffee shops or other places, but since then we've been working from home. So today I'm going to talk about the concepts that have helped me in my transition from working in a large open plan office to working predominantly from home on my own. So we're going to talk about time management, we're going to talk about planning, and we're going to talk about communication. Now, obviously in the 4 years since I've been working with Lucy, my role has changed as well. Initially, I was looking after the magazine and the magazine website, and that has now expanded to include the content for the sites for our events, so for all the live sites, and for Exec Tech, and also the content for the Speaker Bureau. So there's quite a lot of things, quite a broad range of content that has to be managed and looked after. So it's really important to make sure that I am devoting enough time to all of these. And there are lots of time management things that you can use, lots of techniques such as the Pomodoro technique or the time boxing technique. All of these things help you work more efficiently with the time that you've got in a day to do things. But I want to step back a bit and look at time management as a whole and talk about things in respect of time in a week, because we talk about 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but actually we live our lives in weeks, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. There is a resource page that goes alongside with this talk, so don't worry too much about taking notes or anything like that. It will be in the resource page. Most of the things that I'm going to talk about today, I have got from books. Hopefully, the good thing about being an editor is that you actually get to read a lot, which I love reading, so I hope that's been really good. But my main go-to book for all of this is a time management book called 168 Hours. You Have More Time Than You Think, by an author called Laura Vanderkam. And she's also written another time management fable, I guess you would call it, called Juliet School of Possibilities. And there's a lovely quote in that which I refer to a lot because I think it really helps clarify what time management is about for me. And it goes like this: time is finite. Expectations are infinite. You are always choosing. Choose well. I'm going to say that again. Time is finite. Expectations are infinite. You are always choosing. Choose well. And that for me kind of sums up the whole concept here. And especially with the 168 hours as well. If you look at your time over a week, there is space to put in your work commitments, your personal commitments, your family commitments, and everything else. It's just a matter of arranging the tiles like a mosaic. And that's what we're going to talk about. So for me, the main takeaway in the book, apart from the 168 hours, is also talking about core competencies. So these are the things that you do that no one else can do. And I'm mainly talking about work here. So as an assistant, one of your core competencies might be calendar management. And there's a lot of talk around how artificial intelligence can take that over and it won't be a thing that we do anymore. Hooray if that's true, because I think it does take up a lot of time. However, we're kind of in an interim phase now where AI can help us with some things, but it doesn't understand context. So it doesn't understand that you can move meeting A to put in meeting B because meeting B is more important. So that's where a good executive assistant can come into things. So if calendar management is your core competency, then that is something you should be focusing on. Lucy likes to use the analogy of the stones, pebbles, and sand in a jar. And it's a very similar thing. If you have a jar and you put the stones in first, and then the pebbles, and then the sand, there's enough room for everything. But if you try and put the sand in first, and then the pebbles, and then the stones, they don't fit. Now here we're talking about the stones being the things that you must do, the pebbles that are the things that are good to do, and the sand is everything else. So for me, my core competencies are producing an issue of the magazine, making sure it goes onto the website on time, and liaising with the authors to make sure that they get everything into me. So those are my core competencies in a work environment, and then everything else fits around that. So the way I organize my week is I know for myself that I have more energy in the mornings, and I'm usually raring to go on a Monday, not so much on a Friday afternoon. So I try and make sure that I've got my 3 to 5 things that I want to get done during the week, and I've kind of roughly scheduled them across my week. But I always make sure that I leave space on Friday mornings to fill up with anything that hasn't got done, that's a priority that needs to be finished that week. And then Friday afternoon is my kind of get back to people with emails, things that maybe need to be done but aren't kind of top of the list. And I spend some time on Friday afternoon looking at my following week to see what needs to be done. So for you as an assistant with calendar management, the trick is to go from being a reactive, task-based assistant where calendaring is just a thing that you do, to being a strategic business partner where you look at the calendar in terms of your executive's goals and aspirations and what needs to be done. So a really good example of this is if, say, for example, your executive is a sales manager and he has been tasked with increasing the sales of his division by 20% across the year. So what does that mean for you as the assistant in terms of adding value to that goal on his calendar? Well, if he needs to grow sales by 20%, he obviously needs to meet with his sales team. Are they weekly meetings? Are they monthly meetings? Are you going to have some kind of a review, maybe a quarterly sales team get together when you get everybody excited, where you review what's happened? Is that going to be a day, a half day? Halfway through the year, do you need to see where you're at? Is there going to be some kind of away day or things like that? Maybe he's going to need some new reports from IT to make sure he's following the sales as they need to be done. Is he going to have to meet with the product people to make sure we've got enough product so the sales team can actually make the sales? So straight away you go from just putting some meetings in his calendar to actually thinking about the big picture and how those meetings serve him best. I'm saying him, but obviously this applies to women as well. So I'm just using him, but it could be them or her, whoever you are working for, basically. So again, you need to think about how you're adding value to your executive's day. Because as an assistant, you are employed by the business to make sure your executive is the best they can be. You may also need to talk to your executive about delegating some of the other meetings he's involved with in order to fit in these new meetings about sales managers and new reports. He may have to forgo some of the others. So is there a member of the team that he's trying to bring forward in terms of skill development? Perhaps that person could attend in his stead, or perhaps he could attend for 20 minutes of a meeting instead of a full hour, and then you could stay for the rest of the meeting as his delegate. So there are lots of ways and things that, with you thinking a little bit differently, you can take a very reactive task and turn it into something that adds value to both you and your executive. The other thing I would also like to talk about is reframing I don't have time Because if you're doing or not doing something because you don't have time, basically what you're saying is it's not a priority. And that may be fine when it comes to work, but if it's things like perhaps you're studying for a professional qualification and you look at your calendar and you go, I don't have time to study, what you're saying is it's not a priority for me. But if it is a priority, then things need to change. What can you get rid of, delegate, defer, or just not do in order that you can have some time to study? So think about things like that as well. And in your personal life, that may mean throwing some money at something, or it may be teaching your children to clean up after themselves or cook, or perhaps enlisting the help of a grandparent or a husband to assist you in some way. Even if you can't do that, just knowing that there isn't enough time to do anything, to do everything, means that you can choose what it is that you actually need to do. The second concept I want to talk about is a project management type competency. So for me, I manage most of my time and think about things in terms of projects. And that is easy in some ways for me because I have an issue to do, I have a website to update, other websites to do things to. They're fairly simple, structured projects. But at its core, at its heart, a project is just a set of tasks that need to be done. It's distinguished in proper project management speak because it has a beginning and an end, and it's not part of business as usual. So you can take that kind of concept and look at it for things that you do. And then basically, when you're managing a project, there are three things that you do. You plan it, you do it, you review it. Repeat. Plan, do, review, repeat. And that's all it is. So for anything that you're about to undertake, I would strongly suggest spending quite a bit of time in the planning phase. For example, your executive has come to you and said he wants to arrange a Zoom call with all of the company to talk about half-year results, and he wants some games. The first question, ask clarifying questions. How long does he want to spend on the games? How interactive should they be? Do they want to be teams or singular? Can it be something as simple as go and grab me 3 things in your house that start with the letter R? Does he want to talk about what these games mean? That will very much determine how much time the games take and how much effort everyone needs to put in. So it's important to understand what the outcome is going to be. What I always like to think about it in terms of how does he want them to feel? You know, if it's a client event, does he want them to leave feeling inspired? Is it an introductory event where he wants them to feel comfortable and get to know the management team and that kind of thing? So knowing why you're doing something or what the outcome, what the purpose is going to be, enables you to plan it more efficiently, do it better, and review it at the end. Part of the things that you can do with regard to time management is to keep a time log. So every half an hour you write down what you're doing. And this can be really good because you can work out what takes a long time. You know, you may put in a half an hour to arrange a meeting. It might take an hour and a half. And then when you look at it, you realize that it takes you an hour and a half every week to sort this meeting out. So therefore you need to block that time on your calendar. It can also be quite helpful in your personal life too. I've discovered that during the pandemic, I spend a lot of time watching home improvement shows on the TV whilst playing solitaire on my phone. That was a bit of a revelation. And so now I try and just limit the time that I'm doing either of those things. I would also say, think about spending time in the planning phase of the project that you're doing. So when I was studying for my project management qualification, our lecturer said to us 90% of the time should be in the planning phase. Because if you get your workflow right and you're working from beginning to end and you know all the stages of what has to happen, there are less likely to be costly mistakes. And most of the things that go wrong in the project are because people haven't thought through exactly what needs to be done. It's the same with me and the house programs that I watch. If you've ever seen Grand Designs or any of those shows, there's always an instant where they're totally out of money and they have to wait before they can move on and do the next stage. But if they planned it properly, they probably wouldn't be in that situation. The other thing I would say is when you start doing time logging, you'll realize that most things take a lot longer than you think they're going to. And then you can allocate time accordingly. So for me now, if I think it's going to take me 45 minutes to do something, I'll block out 90 just in case. And then the good thing is, if you've got, if it doesn't take 90 minutes, it only takes 60, I've got half an hour to do something else with. The trick here is not to think, I should clean out my inbox for half an hour. Maybe you could, but is there another project, another big thing that you're working on that is a core competency that is important for your executive, that you could spend 30 minutes doing something on that and moving that forward instead? There will always be email. Email is one of those things that expands to fill the time available. A lot of that stuff is important, some of it is not. So again, it's recognizing what you need to do for that. You may do the time log and realize that actually there is too much work to do, but at least now that you have got something concrete that you can discuss with your manager about what things are important and what things can wait, and how your day can be structured better to help them have a better structure on their day. So for managing things like projects, if it's not a formal project, then the plan, do, review method works really well. And alongside that, I use another method called GTD, which stands for Getting Things Done. And it's by a productivity kind of guru called David Allen. Now, with all of these things I'm talking about, I don't use them religiously, mainly because if you really invest too much in a system, the system ends up managing you, and you end up spending all your time putting things in boxes rather than actually doing them. So for all of these things I'm mentioning, take the bits that work for you, make your own time management productivity plan and go for it, and tweak it. With all of these things, even with project management, it's plan, do, review. So what you're planning to use might not work for you in some situations, so you need to review it. The David Allen GTD method, it has 5 steps. And I'm just going to quickly read through them. Again, this is in the resource sheet. You don't need to worry about it. The first thing he talks about is capture. So capture what has your attention. For me, I have a notebook where I write everything down to do with work. And I have a notebook where I write everything down to do with home. So it's really useful to have one kind of capture sheet and then organize them into where it needs to be. So for example, you're in the middle of a board meeting, you're taking minutes, and you suddenly think, I need to buy dishwashing liquid this evening on the way home. I need to buy dishwashing liquid or you run out. So you can quickly write dishwashing liquid and move on. Then you go back later, take the dishwashing liquid thing that you've written down, and capture it, you put it in the right place, i.e. the shopping list. But it's quite good to do a brain dump as well. So the first time you do it, this is really quite scary, because if you get out of your brain everything that's like rattling around in there that you haven't done yet, there is quite a lot of stuff that you're just kind of thinking about all the time. But your brain doesn't like things that aren't complete. Okay, so it will always come back around and remind you of the tasks that you haven't yet done, and it will keep doing that until you've done them. The trouble is, it reminds you at the worst possible time. However, if you have that thought, you've captured it and you've put it somewhere else, you can move on, because your brain is no longer distracted. It knows that you've dealt with it, you know that you've dealt with it, and you'll come back to doing it later. So that can be quite a useful thing to do. Clarify what has to happen with the thing that you've captured. Are you doing it? Are you delegating it? Are you deferring it? Is it actually something you don't need to do, so you can just delete it? Organize it. So this is when you work out shopping list, stuff for work. There are things that you can do. If you need to make some phone calls, you need to be somewhere quiet and you've got your phone with you. So you might have a list called phone calls. You'll have a shopping list, and but you need to have that somewhere that when you're in the shop, you've got access to the shopping list. So depending how you work, whether it's electronic or paper-based, For myself, I find notes for work better if I'm actually writing stuff down because I remember it better. For things like shopping lists, you can just go, Alexa, add it to my shopping list, or whatever it might be. You can have it captured electronically somewhere. And I use a method. I use a method of all three. I'm also not a massive fan of inbox zero. I think sometimes people are so focused on getting their inbox to zero that they're actually not focused on doing the work. But again, you do you, whatever works for you. As Michelle Bowditch says, you do you. So whatever works for you. I would also strongly suggest that as an assistant, it really is a really good idea to do a project management qualification. We have a number of trainers on the Speaker Bureau, and some of who are speaking at live this week over this event, who are really good at project management, and it's also part of the ASEA course as well if you're doing that. The reason I'm saying to do it is because you do a lot of projects and you don't even realize that they're projects, but what it will do more is you'll be able to speak the language when you're speaking to executives and members of the senior team. When you're talking about project, you'll be able to use the right language that they use, and so that will make you more visible to them, and it will show that you have a concept of the strategy behind the project, which is really important for growing your business acumen and your business role. You also need to be aware that stopping or not finishing a project is also a valid outcome as part of your review process. So you may realize that when you're doing the project, that actually isn't serving you well and it's not working. I would also say capture everything for your review process as you're going along. So for example, as we're working on the live event, I was making a list of the things that didn't get to me in time, perhaps I could have done earlier, things that I could have planned better to start with, so that next time we do it, it'll be smoother. And that's the whole point. You need to learn from your processes and keep going so that you can do it better. Especially with regards to calendar management, looking ahead to what's coming up is really important. So as you're planning your next week, perhaps you're doing your Friday review and you're planning what you're doing the next week, you realize that you've got a 15-person event where people are coming into the office, but it's also forecast to be snow that week. So you might need to think about, well, do we want 15 people traveling into an office to meet in person? And you might not necessarily know whether the snow day is going to be Thursday or Friday, and it might not happen, but you need to have a contingency. And again, that's as an assistant, you're thinking ahead, you're being a strategic business partner, you're thinking about the bigger picture. So, it's a good idea to go to your executive and say, snow, this event, do you want it to be in person? Does it have to be in person? Should I tell everyone we're keeping it on the same day, but because of snow, we'll make a decision that morning as to whether it becomes a conference call, a Zoom call, or should we move it to next week when there isn't any snow forecast and see what happens? And again, that shows your executive that you're thinking of them and the time and the bigger picture, and it's positioning you as a strategic business partner. The final thing is communicating your victories. Showing your executive, either in writing or verbally, that the things that you are doing are making a difference. This is especially important during the pandemic. When we are all working remotely, it's much harder for people to see what you're doing. So it's really important that you do those kind of updates. I had one manager who didn't really want to meet with me, so I would send them a weekly update of the things that I'd worked on that had helped them during the week to keep them in view. And then I would also send them a list of the things that were coming up that they needed to be aware of as well. And that's how we communicated. That was their preferred style. If you can get a face-to-face, that's even better. But I would also suggest that you need to think about capturing these things for your monthly review, your performance reviews, for putting on your CV, for demonstrating a return on investment, so that people know what has to happen. What you're looking for is to make yourself an invaluable assistant rather than an indispensable one. So the thing I would suggest when we're talking about calendar management, when you put that on your CV or your LinkedIn profile, do you just have a bullet point that says calendar management and that's it? Or do you have something that says effective complex diary management for the CEO and team and give an example? Do you have something that says anticipating and managing conflicts and prioritizing meetings where necessary, giving an example? Do you have something that might say the ability to understand and schedule meetings around deadlines and give an example? Now I haven't made these up, by the way. These are all part of an article that Sarah Howson wrote for us for Executive Secretary magazine, and I have included a link to that article in the resources page. But can you see the difference? Calendar management, what does that mean? It's a very reactive task. However, saying things like that, effective diary management, anticipating and managing conflicts, and giving examples such as the sales manager example I used earlier, really shows that you are a strategic business partner, that you have your executive's best interests at heart, that you understand the business and you are looking for ways that your executive can be more efficient and hitting their goals, and you can too. Because as the L'Oreal advert says, we are worth it.